The 2026 NFL Combine is over, and we'll tell you if it was a good or bad combine for Dallas next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into an even bigger payout with college basketball parlay profit boosts. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we're talking about the 2026 NFL Combine. And Landon, let's start with this, because I feel like, you and I have been covering these combines for a long time now.
Yeah.
It is certainly different than it was even 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, it's just a completely different event. What was your kind of takeaway coming out of this weekend?
Well, I will say that I think last year really felt like, and not to kind of be overly dramatic, but it really felt like the beginning of the end for the combine, right? Like less participants participating, and it was like dramatic. It wasn't even just like a slight tailing off. It was suddenly like all the top participants weren't doing all the testing. Whole groups were missing whole tests. And it's, again, like it's one of those things that, like, for a whole subsection of this industry, they do so much work based very much on the testing that they get out of the combine, the kind of standardized element of the testing that they get out of the combine. So I will say that I felt like this year kind of was maybe a step back in the right direction. We still had a lot of the top end guys not work out, and still definitely were missing a lot. But I still feel like the energy and excitement around the ones who did, I think will hopefully kind of turn the tide for at least a certain portion, while the combine kind of calibrates itself to a new normal. But I think, it is kind of clear that the combine that we used to get, I'll say 2020, pre-2020, pre-COVID,
Yes.
And post-COVID has been extremely different. And it does seem to be trending in the wrong way overall.
Yeah, 2020 was the draft that you had CeeDee Lamb, who, a lot of people thought was going to be a top 10 pick in that class, and Jerry Jeudy. They did everything. They did everything at the combine. The entire positional group was out there, and they weren't concerned necessarily about having bad tests. And I wonder a couple of things. I think these agents have gotten smarter about how to minimize the bad drills for these players. Right? If you're not going to run a fast 40, you're just not going to run, right?
Yeah.
And I do wonder if the RAS scores, the relative athletic scores, agents are just looking at these, and they don't want their players to put up bad numbers. So if you're going to run a bad 40, or you're going to have a bad 3 cone, you're just not going to do it. And it's better just to not do it than put a bad number out there.
Yeah, and again, like I think that there used to be more of a culture around just not doing, of participating, of competing, and like, okay, yeah, you might have a bad number here, but you do it, and you take your lumps, and then that's what it is. I understand the thought process here, and I understand why agents are advising their players against it. It's just,
I honestly think was it 2021, the Micah draft, where there was no combine. And it was a really good draft. I wonder if that really impacted it, because once we didn't have a combine and guys were still getting drafted early, I think I think agents and players are like, I don't need this.
I think, now that you say that, you're right. It was the 2020. That's actually the combine that I was referring to. That I think that that's the one where when after you miss it, it's like, then do you have to have it? Is it still essential, right? And I think there are a lot of things in our world were like that after COVID, right? So, but I think it's one of those things now where it's just different, right? It's not as vital to draft prospects, draft stock. And I think that you're just seeing that more and more agents are trying to shield their players from, what could be bad stock hits. And it just feels like it's opportunities lost though in some of these situations, right?
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, NFL Network kept saying this is the fastest wide receiver group ever and the fastest quarterback group. Yeah, it's because all those guys weren't testing, right? Like all the guys that were bad athletes aren't testing. But my question for you, like big picture here, should we give a bump to the guys that are participating? Because like for me, I thought it was really cool that like Jeremiah Love, who does not have much to gain, goes out there and runs the 40 and he does all the on-field drills. You've got Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese all out there doing everything. I mean, I know those guys are athletic, but they also didn't need to do any of these drills. I was a little disappointed in like Mansour Delane and Jermon McCoy. And, these are two guys that are fighting to be top 20 picks and they don't show out at the combine. So I do wonder, how do we deal with this? Should we put guys up higher that aren't afraid to test? Do you knock guys down that don't test at all pre-draft? What do you do here?
I think it goes back to how comfortable you are with certainty, right? And if you're not comfortable with the high level of uncertainty, then I think you're going to naturally feel inclined to give extra weight to these guys who went out there in the kind of neutral situation and put their athletic testing out there, good or bad. But I think, you have to realize that some of these guys who aren't testing are worth drafting still, right? Like you have to just understand. Yes. I mean, I think we understand that, right? But so it's like, if you decide to kind of put extra weight on the guys that are going out there at the combine and participating versus the ones who aren't, you're probably going to be okay most of the time, because most of the time you're picking the superior athletes. But I think that you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to miss a lot more on some of these guys than maybe some other teams that are willing to ignore that.
Let me ask you someone like CJ Allen, who we had maybe some athleticism concerns. You watch this linebacker class and it's so fast. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't test. He doesn't do any of the on-field drills. He's somebody who has been frequently mentioned to the Cowboys at 20. Because he didn't do anything in Indianapolis, are you now a little bit more concerned about that pick and in the later stages of round one?
I just feel like what it does is that it kind of puts more stress on him to put up really good pro day numbers.
Well, what if he doesn't do anything at the pro day? Because that's another trend we've seen. These guys are just skipping everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's scary. Like, I think if the question is like, I think there's levels to this, right? Like, obviously, willing to participate in the combine is like the ultimate level of participation, in my opinion, right? Like, doing in the pro day is fine, it's acceptable. But not testing at all, like that to me falls into the category of, what are you hiding? And I think that even though it's a strategy that's given by agents, I don't think it's a good strategy, because ultimately, if we have questions here, you're not quenching that thirst with and that's probably worse for scouts and for GMs than just being able to kind of, GMs and scouts know how to like talk themselves into players. If they got your numbers, they at least know they're working with something. I think this is a worse situation, to be honest.
Two things for me. I like the guys that are willing to go out there and compete. And that's why I really respect someone like Carnell Tate, who he knows he's not a 4.3 guy. He goes out there and he runs a 4.53. Everybody's talking about it on Twitter. I don't care. Like, honestly, I don't care if he ran a 4.47 versus a 4.53, because I like the competitiveness. Mekhi Lemon didn't do a thing, did not run the 40. Jordan Tyson didn't run the 40. He's not afraid of it. So I like that. And then the other part of it is, if you don't like your number, just tell Adam Schefter that scouts had you at a different one. You'll be fine.
That's right. I mean, listen, if that's going to be acceptable data point at this point.
Can you explain to me, like, what's the reasoning behind this, where we have these electric times and then we'll get reports, well, hey, 3 teams that had my 4.44. That's what they had at Intel. That's what they're going to go. Why? What's the point of that?
Well, I think you know it's just as well as I do that scouts are generally Luddites and that they are against modern technology as much as possible. So they're going to tell you, hey, my stopwatch that I've used since 1978 is just as good as these newfangled laser timers. I'll tell you that much right now.
Well, the theory behind it is that the stopwatches travel from, Indy to
Yes.
Georgia. I mean, but man, you want to talk about leaving some room in there for human error. It's just, it's whatever. All right, let's talk about if this was a good or a bad combine for the Cowboys, because the Cowboys have 2 picks, obviously. Did we see a lot of players improve their stocks? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into an even bigger payout with college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay that you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read. You can mix spreads, you can mix totals and player props all on the FanDuel app. So go safe, go bold, ride with your team that you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside than ever before. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com, and play your game with FanDuel. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with skills, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping that the right candidate stumbles across your post. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. The offseason never stops if you're a Cowboy fan, and neither do we. So get 1 month free of the Everydayer Club with the code FREE AGENCY. It's all one word, no spaces. Now through March 15th, go ad free and keep the conversation going on Discord. Join the club at lockedoncowboys.supercast.com. All right, Landon, let's talk about the combine for the Cowboys. How do you think this combine shaped up for Dallas? Do you think it was a good, bad, or just neutral performance overall?
So I think there's 2 metrics here, right? That kind of dictate whether the Cowboys had a good combine or whether this was a good combine from the point of view of the Dallas Cowboys. One is the kind of supply and demand aspect of it. And I think it was making sure that you had players at the positions you need that are hitting the metrics that you like, right? And I think that was kind of a mixed review day, right? Because we didn't get anything from Mansour Delane. We didn't get anything from CJ Allen, as you mentioned. Jermod McCoy, who we had kind of still had to hold out hope would do some testing, still says he's not 100%, which is, again, pretty scary, right?
He also came in a little smaller and shorter than we expected.
Yeah, Delane came in at a good size. He was a little bit taller than I expected. I'd like to see him a little bit bigger, but I'm not going to double count that we knew he was undersized. He was undersized, but he wasn't like severely undersized. You got some really great numbers from some other guys, right? Sonny Styles and Thieneman. We'll talk about some of those other guys a little bit later, but you got some good numbers from some of the other guys that you were hoping would give you good numbers, because you want to have a whole lot of available picks for you at 12 and 20. You want to have guys who are worthy of that. But the other side, the other metric of this that kind of dictates whether the Cowboys had a good day is the availability of those players that you want to be picked when you have those picks. And what really is dictating that is, are the players at the other positions, the positions you're not going to be drafting, how did they perform in this combine? And in that sense, I think the Cowboys had a pretty good day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think specifically the guys that we were looking at to have kind of days to boost their profile a little bit were guys like Ty Simpson, who I think went out there, threw the ball really well in this combine, maybe elevated his stock. You also saw some of the other guys like Nussmeier and I forget who the other
Drew Aller was another one.
Drew Aller was the other guy that was throwing right from Penn State. Those aren't necessarily first round guys, or certainly not guys that are going to get in front of 12 or 20. But Ty Simpson is a guy that, if there's enough of a whisper campaign, has a good pro day, maybe somebody can convince themselves into picking him above one of your 2 picks. I think there's also some offensive linemen, including the guy from Georgia that
Monroe Freeling.
Monroe Freeling that had a really big day. That's going to help you out as well. I think the other side of this is that you didn't get any of the real wide receiver workouts except for Mekhi Lennon running the gauntlet, and then Tate doing everything, but maybe not like blowing. I mean, he did fine, and just fine is fine for his stock, but we wanted him to have a blow it out of the park, performance so that he could secure himself as a top 10 pick, because we need him to push down players to us at 12. So I think it was kind of mixed review overall. Like, there's some good, there's some bad. I think the guys you like mostly checked boxes, except for the ones we talked about. And the stock, as far as availability of the guys you want, I think that you maybe improved a little bit, but we'll see as the next few weeks come up.
Here's the way I look at it. There are 3 guys that are right now being ranked outside of the top 15 on the consensus board that I think all had huge days that now I think are at least in the conversation to go inside the top 12. And those guys are Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon, running a 4.3, whatever he officially ran. Monroe Freeling, who we talked about from Georgia. He was somebody that's being pretty frequently mocked like into the early 20s. And now I just don't see him getting outside the top 12 because there's such a need for tackles.
Just the need is so strong, they're going to push it up.
And the other one is Caleb Banks. And we've talked about Caleb Banks before. He is a hit or miss prospect, but he's so big. He's so athletic. I don't know if he goes inside the top 12, but I do feel pretty good that he goes inside the top 20 before the Cowboys pick at 20. So I do think he had a good day. The other part of this, Landon, is it's hard to exactly say what's good or bad for the Cowboys, because let's use Carnell Tate, right? We would like to see Carnell Tate go before the Cowboys pick at 12, right? But we would also like to see the Cowboys maybe trade down at one point at 12 or 20. And one thing we know is that if teams are moving up for players, it's generally for quarterbacks, wide receivers, or edge rushers, right? Like, those are the 3 guys. And if Carnell Tate is suddenly available at 12, you're not going to pick him, but there could be a team like the Ravens that need a receiver, the Jets who need a receiver, the Steelers who need a receiver that might all suddenly want to get up to that spot to get him. So we've been rooting for him to have an awesome combine, but I don't want to even call it subpar, just an average performance now actually helps you out.
Yeah, and I think that's average is exactly right. Like, I mean, I think what we were looking for was a superstar performance to vault him up. And I think you're right. Like, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword a little bit, right? Where you definitely want him picked above you. But if one of the guys that you're not expecting, if one of the guys that you expect to be picked in the top 10 were to fall, he's one of the guys you would like to fall. Right, because of what you said, right there, I think there's other guys who could fall out of the top 10 that we're expecting that it wouldn't necessarily be good for the Cowboys, because maybe they don't necessarily have the same sort of value that would cause a team to trade up for them, as or be good trade bait. I do agree that I think that Tate is not one of those guys. Tate is a guy that if he fell to you at 12. There would likely be teams calling, because again, there's a lot of wide receiver needy teams out there. I am also wondering if like guys like Fano and Freeling aren't starting to become like that just because of their position as well, and Malalaga as well. Like, there's a chance now that we see, if there's their need, that there could be as many as 3 offensive linemen that go in that top 12 before us at 12.
I mean, I remember at this time last year, we thought, okay, the only offensive lineman going inside the top 10 is Will Campbell. That was pretty well mocked for a while. And then Amar Membu had a really good combine. And all of a sudden, I think he ended up being the 7th overall pick. Kelvin Banks ended up being a top 10 pick to the Saints. Teams need offensive linemen, and it's not sexy to mock them inside the top 10, even if it feels like a little bit of a reach at this time. But once you get closer and closer to the draft, these guys get pushed up. And I think Freeland and even someone like Caden Proctor, who I don't love, teams are going to look at a 350-pound offensive tackle that can move the way he can and want to take a chance on him.
Blake Miller too. I don't know if he gets up above where the Cowboys are at 12 and 20, but another guy.
I think he's going to above 20. I don't think he gets above 12, but
that's certainly his possibility. But I mean, again, just another guy who checks boxes at a position of huge need.
Yes,
could very likely be a pick in the top 20 picks.
All right, let's talk about guys that fit Dallas and how they performed this weekend. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. We live in a world where you can stream anything, order food in minutes, and carry supercomputers in our pockets. And yet buying tickets to a live game still feels complicated. Hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, endless steps. There has to be a better way. And that's why I use the Game Time app. It gives the advantage back to the fans, and it makes getting tickets simple, whether it's NFL games, concerts, comedy, whatever you're into. I was actually just using the Game Time app yesterday because I'd like to go see a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey game. Sidney Crosby's going to be out for a while, but that's okay. The prices are cheap now, and it's unbelievable some of the seats and deals that you can get. You could even spot zone deals where you pick the section that you want to sit in, and Game Time will pick the seats to give you extra savings. 2 taps, and you're locked into great seats. Fast, easy, and it's over with. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off, and download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the NFL Combine. Landon, what about the players that fit Dallas? Who do you think had a strong performance this weekend?
Well, we talked about Thieneman earlier, right? And I think we've talked about Sonny Styles. We've gone over some of the linebackers, so I'm going to focus on some of the folks we haven't discussed yet. But I think it starts with Thieneman, at least for me, right? Like I thought he went out there and performed exactly like we kind of thought he would. He's an elite athlete. I think he went out and showed that. I think, we had some, I think there were some questions.
Is he, there's a lot of people now putting him up in like to the 12 conversation. Is he there for you?
I would not be upset with taking him at 12 if that had to be the pick, but he certainly is not quite to the spot where I'm like, he's my preference at 12. Like if he's, I think he's a high floor player to take at 12. My question is because of positional value. I don't think he's quite as special as Caleb Banks is. But that's why I would be over the moon if Caleb Downs. I'm going to keep doing that all draft season. That's why I think like I would be over the moon if it was Caleb Downs somehow Feldy, which I do think maybe the odds of that increased this weekend, but we could talk about that in a bit. But I think Thieneman is like, because of his position, to me, again, I see him as a slot, as safety kind of hybrid guy. I just wonder, like, are you going to be able to get the full value of what you're getting at? But again, that position is becoming more valuable. Maybe the contracts are going to go up, and maybe you're just getting ahead of the curve by drafting a player like that at 12. I certainly think he's qualified as a mid-round first pick with his talent. I just, I wonder about the talent plus the positional value.
Yeah, and I think Thieneman is more of an option at 20, but would I be surprised if we start hearing more about him as an option at 12? No. The guy for me was Avion Terrell, the cornerback from Clemson. I mean, the metrics and the measurables are not going to blow you away. He's got, 30-inch arms. He was 188 pounds. He's 5'10" and a half. But you watch the drills, like the on-field work. He is so smooth. And it's like, again, I not probably an option at 12, and I know the Cowboys prefer longer cornerbacks, but I just feel so confident that he's going to find a way to be a good player. Maybe he's never a Pro Bowl player. Maybe he's more like in the Jordan Lewis, range of players. Would it be really nice to have one of those players again on your defense?
I mean, Jordan Lewis was a guy that Jerry Jones mentioned this very weekend on the bus, right? As a guy that he felt like maybe they got rid of a little too soon. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they're now back in the mood for these kind of players because they realize that they have value, especially in the slot. So, again, I totally agree. I thought he looked incredibly smooth. We can't get out of the segment without talking about your guy, right? Emmanuel McNeil Warren.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had a good combine, but he kind of checked a different set of boxes than I thought he was going to check. His speed was not necessarily elite, but that's okay because he came in at like 6'4".
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like,
when did a 6'4" safety that ran a 4.53 suddenly be considered a slow safety?
I'm not. I'm just, I think
yeah.
there's a lot of people out there talking, and you're right. Like, yeah, absolutely. And I think that was what I was going to come in here to defend your guy, right? Because, 4.53 is, I guess, a slow time, which to me seemed just fine. Again, especially since he's 6'4" and not 6'2.5" or whatever we thought. And I think you see that on tape. He's a guy that, like, especially in the back end of coverage, like he's very rangy. He can cover a lot of ground because he can stride out and he covers a lot of ground. So, yeah, I think another guy that kind of checked the boxes you needed him to in order to be a first round pick if teams like his tape enough.
The safety class is really good. And this is where just talking about Caleb Downs, who didn't do any testing. Not that I'm concerned about it because safety is the one position that the athleticism matters, but it doesn't matter so much the difference between a 4.48 and a 4.55, right? Instincts matter so much more. But I do wonder if you're a team like the Bengals or the Chiefs that are drafting ahead of the Cowboys, you see all these awesome athletes at safety. Maybe you decide to take a David Bailey or a Reuben Bain or a Jeremiah Love instead and wait to capitalize on this awesome safety class. I wouldn't be surprised if you get somebody like Caleb Downs falling in this draft.
I wouldn't be. I don't think Sonny Styles is going to fall necessarily to the Cowboys at 12, but I wouldn't be this shocked because I think the linebackers had a similar week, right? Where you saw them really test out well, and there's a bunch of them. The linebacker from Texas, I thought, really had a good day. So, yeah, I just think that a lot of guys that are going to make you think twice, especially these guys in the top 7-8 picks, like, do they want to take this guy here or do you want to wait to the second round? It's a question that could have really major consequences for the Cowboys at 12.
That is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free plus members-only Discord access and so much more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.